So now we've taken up the call because we're an adventuring group of heroes. And of course, you know, it's D&D, so gotta go take care of the bandits. Uh, we initially try to go across the main road that would take us around the bend of the hill. And we found out that the harpy thing was not, in fact, bullshit. Um, More importantly, we found out that we could not, in fact, handle as many harpies as uh, David had put in there. I don't know how many were originally in the module, but he he put a lot in there. Um, Edwin initially tried to go up into this tree where it had looked like a good portion of them had made their nesting while they were busy flying around scavenging for food or whatever else they could scavenge for. And Edwin kind of became our pseudo thief as well. Even though he didn't really have a whole lot of skills in that because he's our bard. But he was kind of always the one to, kind of sneak in there and try and grab anything that he could. And I think he saw something like gleaming in between the what the nest was made out of in the sunlight when he had made his perception roll. And he's like, all right, I'm gonna go up there. he 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 gets up there. He climbs up there pretty well. Um, and he starts rummaging around. And he's like, "All right, what do I find?" And he's like, "Oh, you find you know, a sack off to one side and embedded in the uh, mess of stuff that makes up this, harpy's nest. And when you pull it out, it's a sack of coins. It looks to be about 300 gold coins. Maybe one of these harpies, took off of somebody. He's like, okay, and he keeps digging around, and he's like, you find a boot. He finds a mirror, and then he finds a ring, and he's like, "Oh, it's a golden ring." He's like, "Do I detect anything?" Because all the time he would detect for magic to see if anything was radiating off of any of these items. He's like, "Do I detect anything off the ring?" He's like, "Yeah, you do, and when you turn it, it has a engraving of a feather on the side." He's like, "Oh shit, yeah, a ring of featherfall," and he puts it on, just automatically. Nothing happens to him, but he's like he just automatically assumes that's what it was, right? So shortly after, he gets up there and starts, rummaging around. Sure enough, three harpies come back and they see him and almost immediately start attacking him, and we can't do anything because he's high up there and he's by himself. He's like, oh shit, oh god, and they're just clawing and pecking at him, and they're jacking him up, and he takes out his sword. At first he had a rapier that he was, believe it or not, surprisingly adept with. Unfortunately, yeah, no, it wasn't going his way at all. And if you know anything about harpies, you know that a group of harpies will jack a person up, like straight up. So he's like, screw this. And he's like, I'm going to take a risk. And he's like, I'm going to jump for it. And he would start like, oh, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I jump off. He's like, okay. And he's like, as you rapidly descend, you notice that your body has, in fact, started to slow down and kind of float, as it were. And he's like, ha, I knew it. And sure enough, it was a ring of featherfall, but there's no way he could have, like, guessed that properly right off the bat, you know? Like, there's no way he could have fully known, and I guess he just took it, you know, off of his best educated guess that that's what that was. And I mean, granted, that's what I would think the ring was, but you can't really know until you go and you actually find somebody who'd be able to actually identify it for you for sure, you know. And he just went off this risk, you know, very how do you say it, crash course way of finding out what this mystical item was. And so, anyways, he lands with no problem, and he's like, "Let's get the fuck out of here," because the harpies up top, they're now screeching for all their other harpy friends. And sure enough, they come out of the woods. Oh my god, on the side of this hill, and they're just, oh wow. I don't even remember how many he said there were. And in fact, I don't think any of us stuck around to like make a perception check to accurately count. There was just this huge swarming cloud of them. And we just booked it as fast as we could back down the hill. And I think we went off the beaten path a little bit. You know, still stuck a little close to the road, but, you know, we kind of went into the woods a bit and kind of veered off course to try and lose them, you know, try and ditch some of them that were just like clawing and pecking at us all the way down, you know. And inevitably we make it down and we ditch the harpies because they're not too interested in going too far away from their territory. Plus, you know, they're busy scavenging, and you know, none of us actually got around to like killing any of them or hurting any of them to the point where they would continuously follow us and attack. So more or less, it was just to get us away from their territory, sort of thing. And we get back down the hill, and we're like, okay, well, what's the next plan, right? Plan A has failed. And so eventually we decide we're going to go across this, go around the other way, off the beaten track, and we're going to go across this, it's like a secondary river that branches off of the main river that goes underneath the bridge / town. There's another little river kind of embedded along the opposite way of the hill that, you know, kind of branches off from the main river. And we decide we're going to go and try and see if we can't cross that. And when we get there, it turns out that it's a little bit too rapid to just go across, you know, without taking the risk, you know, running the risk of being swept up. And so we're looking for a way to cross this river, right? And Talim's like, well, this is kind of what I do, and she's going to go do her thing as a ranger, and she's she's rolling for perception, and she goes and she's like, well, can I see anything anywhere? And she's kind of doing her scouting ahead thing. And she gets a terrible roll, and it's like, no, you're not seeing anything. As far as a clear way across, if there was a clear way across at one point in time, it might have been swept up by the rapids or maybe destroyed by the bandits, as a way to cut off access to this particular route up the hill. And so then David's like, you know what? I'll go ahead and I'll have my character check himself, because his character is also a ranger, and he rolls shitty, and he's like, oh well, looks like I'm not doing any better than you are. And so basically his ranger was called Mac. Technically his ranger was like I don't remember his full name, but we all just called him Mac because it was it was a rather long name, and he had a first and last name for this character, which isn't too uncommon for our group anymore these days. But for the most part, we just called him Mac. And so Mac's looking around, and Column's looking around, and they're not finding anything. And of course, Edwin, he's like, you know what? I go up there and I see if I can spot anything, right? So Edwin goes up to spot to see if there's anything he could use, or maybe there's something, up the river a ways, or he's gonna put his foot forward and give it a shot, and he rolls shitty too, and it's like, no, you don't spot anything. And he's like, okay, does my donkey spot anything? I'm like, what? And David's like, what? And everybody's kind of just like looking at him like, what? And he's like, yeah, does my donkey spot anything? David's like, well, I guess roll for your donkey? Like, roll for Hermes, the donkey. And so he does, and I shit you not, he gets it. He gets a critical fucking roll, right? And sure enough, the donkey, while we're all looking around like a bunch of idiot, goes up the river a ways. And David's like, yeah, he kind of sees this dead tree that's kind of lumbering over to the side, and kind of barely hanging in there by the roots. And he goes over to the tree up the riverbank away, and he goes and he pushes the tree down. He jumps up there, and with his front 2 feet, he kind of slams into it and pushes it down, and sure enough, it comes down, and it flies down the river over to where, our main group is, and it catches on a rock, and sure enough makes this temporary makeshift bridge that y'all can cross, one by one. And we're like, did that really just happen? Sure enough, the donkey's the one who got us across the river. But yeah, I couldn't believe that. Fucking man, he just goes up there and he's like, does my donkey see anything? Does my donkey